Hi, I'm Powell Slaughter with Furniture Today, and welcome to this edition of News Desk. Joining me today is FragilePAK Chief Commercial Officer Jim Mikrut. FragilePAK is a specialist in home delivery of heavy goods, which also includes furniture, of course. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in that realm these days. As we all know, it's been a pretty crazy year, and it's affected just about every aspect of the industry across the board, from vendors to retailers to service providers. Jim, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, looking at this pandemic, for a while everything shut down. There were limitations, of course, on home delivery. Different processes. Can you talk about some of the lessons that y'all have learned as far as it goes with final mile operations, and whether that's led to new processes, new methods of communication with your customers, and how you see that playing out?
Sure. I mean, I think if I was to take one word that describes this past year, and specifically with the pandemic, it's fluidity. Every day is a new day. It's a different situation, and just when you think that you've round the corner and you've been able to adapt and adjust, something new happens. And so for us, we've always taken great pride in being a very customer experience focused organization, offering a variety of levels of services to our customers and our customers' customers. And so, really being able to adapt to a pandemic that, quite frankly, although yes, it's hit our world and it's hit our nation, there are certain areas within the U.S. that it's hit more. And so therefore, we've had to take a look at, certain hotspots, looking at CDC guidelines, and quite frankly, listen to what the end consumers are telling us, what they're telling the customers, their point of sale purchases, because, really, whether you've been directly impacted by COVID, or you've actually you're just a concerned citizen because of the state of affairs due to the pandemic, people still are purchasing, and as a result, they need it delivered. So therefore, there's a variety of schools of thought by the end consumer as to whether or not they want people coming to their home to make deliveries still.
Okay, and also you're dealing with depending on the state, the region, there are a lot of variations in what's required.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about maybe what you're doing to increase the flexibility, one for the customer, the end consumer who might have some issues, and also how you're communicating with retailers and those consumers these days on the delivery process?
Yeah, and like I had mentioned, we pay very close attention to hotspots, pay close attention to CDC. I mean, one of the things that's interesting and I'm thankful for is that as a delivery organization, we are essential services, and so we're always paying close attention to what the doctors are saying, what the CDC is saying, looking at those hotspots. But what could be a hotspot today, 2 weeks from now, might not be. And so how do you adapt to that? So it's really big on, it's kind of twofold. It's communication with our customer, but it's also understanding the realm of the end consumer, the consignee, to see what they feel comfortable with as well. And so for us, we're directly connected and communicating with our customers on a regular basis pertaining specifically to these hotspots. So if there are certain areas in a region that CDC is saying, recommending no contact, et cetera, we're communicating that up front with our customers. But we've kind of taken a step further, going back to my point of really being focused on the customer experience. The last thing I want, the last thing that our company wants, the last thing that our customers want is for an end consumer to feel uncomfortable. And so part of our communication process is really communicating early on within the life cycle of that shipment to quite frankly ask questions which have been difficult in when framing up, but really asking questions, is there any reason why, and we call our delivery teams delivery specialists, why our delivery specialists shouldn't come to your home or shouldn't come into your home? And so, no, granted, when on the surface, that's kind of a vague question, but it affords the end consumer, if there is a concern about COVID, and it doesn't dance a fine line with HIPAA violation, and because we're asking concerns. There are markets where they're not necessarily deemed hotspots, but end consumers just still want a white glove delivery. They don't want two people coming into their home. And so therefore, we've had to adapt to those situations, and our customers have had to adapt to it as well. Answering your question about kind of like the service piece, we've got customers that really only subscribe to white glove service that have had to rethink their process in how they're offering services to their customer base, and have tailored that back from white glove to either a threshold or even some cases kind of like the to-the-door delivery.
Okay. When you go into a customer's a consumer's home, mm-hmm. What are some things that you're doing now that you weren't doing, say, a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key pieces, if we're crossing the plane of the threshold, the expectation of all of our delivery specialists is that they're wearing booties at a minimum. And in some cases, if we can wear gloves, we wear gloves throughout the years. But there's certain product that you're handling that you just can't do that from a safety perspective. Now, it's really evolved to a point of making sure that all of the delivery specialists have proper PPE, including masks, including gloves, and of course booties. Really looking at what other steps we can take, ensuring that the delivery specialists post a delivery are actually using hand sanitizers within the trucks, and really making sure that end consumer, if they are choosing to have us still enter their home, making sure that end consumer feels comfortable. And they don't have to be right next to us. They're opening the door. They're seeing that we take this seriously. We take their safety seriously. We convey that to our customers so that way they can convey that to their customers as well. And it's important because, you answer the door, and we're all consumers. But you answer the door and you have concerns, and the last thing you want to do is see two people standing at your door that don't have masks, don't have gloves, because perception then becomes reality, and they're not taking this seriously. I don't feel comfortable. And now what you could have ultimately had a very positive experience has quickly turned into a negative one.
Yeah, this kind of goes both ways too. You've got the consumer, their safety. You got your guys.
Absolutely.
Have you ever had any issues where your own personnel thought, I'm really not comfortable going into this place?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it's a touchy subject, mm-hmm. But there have been certain situations, especially early on in the pandemic, when and we're still all learning, right? But early on in the pandemic, when we really don't have the level of intelligence that we have today. Mm-hmm. You've now interpreted a person who maybe just has a common cold is now all of a sudden they're infected with COVID, right? And so we had to walk through those scenarios with all of our locations to make sure that, we are not only being safe internally, yes, making sure that the delivery teams are not coming to work ill, making sure that they are, they're fever free, of course, that they're taking proper precautions with hand sanitizers, with, proper cleaning from a hygiene perspective. And then again, the PPE. So now, I kind of, some of the things I said a couple of minutes earlier, those early on lessons as part of this journey, it has prompted that evolution of being smarter, at least for us, and trying to get as much information as possible up front from the end consumer. So that way we know that, hey, look, if an end consumer is saying they don't feel comfortable with two people coming into their home, okay, we get that. We can convey that information to our customer to make sure that they understand that, in this case, we might not necessarily be doing a white glove shipment based upon constantly request, and therefore we're going to downgrade it. And it keeps everybody feeling comfortable with, that delivery experience.
Yeah, and I would think, that communication with the consumer, you can also let them know about, your expectations and what, how your guys want to work too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of moving along, what do you see as the longer term impacts of what we're talking about here on final mile operations? Kind of moving beyond the pandemic, are there any patterns or processes or communication preferences that you see really kind of having some sticking power?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, going back to my keyword of fluidity, since it is fluid, it's about being able to have that proactive adaptability to a situation. And so staying, in any realm, staying ahead of the curve is very important. Making sure that we are staying in touch with those certain hotspots within a region, making sure that we're keeping our team safe, ultimately driving a better customer experience and keeping the end consumer safe when we show up at their residence. And so, I think that it's just a matter of focusing in on what the end consumer says. The end consumer voice is the most critical component here, regardless. I mean, I can sit from an executive position at an awesome home delivery company. Our customers can sit in an awesome position selling a wonderful product to the end consumers. But at the end of the day, we're not the ones receiving it, right? It's the end consumer, and end consumer perception is ultimately reality. And so the end consumer's voice needs to be heard, and it needs to be acted upon, because in our space, I don't feel that two people in a truck making a white glove delivery is impressive. That's just the foundational element of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Makes us, from a FragilePAK perspective, what I feel is kind of separating us is our focus on the end consumer experience in addition to technology and operational execution. And so all of those things combined, address these scenarios. And so we'll always continue to listen to the end consumer voice. And maybe the questions we're asking today pertaining to COVID
Mm-hmm.
different that we're going to ask 2 weeks from now. But again, it's just a matter of listening to that end consumer to make sure that we are addressing their concerns up front.
Great. Well, and again, you're talking about the consumer experience here. What do you see in terms of technology and processes and communication, influencing that the consumer experience and the efficiency of your own operations down the road?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's communicating clearly, communicating early. I would say communicating often to the end consumer. What's interesting is that when the pandemic really first kind of got the wind, right, and started increasing, and we're seeing all these cases, one of the things where we started questioning, because you're hearing concerns from products from a retail perspective, manufacturing getting, having challenges getting product coming from overseas. You wonder if people are going to stop their purchasing or changing in purchasing behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting piece is that, end consumers are now, a lot of end consumers now are working remotely, right? We're working from home. As you work from home, you sit at your desk or you sit on your sofa or you're laying in your bed and you're realizing, boy, this really isn't that comfortable, right? And so you've seen this increase in purchasing, but end consumers are now saying, I'm spending my money at a time when there's a lot of concern from an economic perspective. So I want to make sure that I'm getting the level of attention and my experience is what I expect for it to be. And so utilizing the technology that we have and communicating not just with the end consumer early on in the life cycle of the order, but making sure that our customers have that same level of intelligence. So therefore, they're seeing the same thing that we're seeing in the event that an end consumer has questions. And again, as we proceed down this path, what we're doing today might change, but I feel that it's important, especially in the mind of a consumer, again, as we all are. It's a matter of, making sure that now once I, as a consumer, have made a purchase, I don't just want to wait and wonder. and then start questioning, right? I want to know that my shipment is moving. I want to know who's delivering it. I want to know what to expect early on. And those are the types of things that we try to capture, again, early on in the life cycle of the order, to make sure that that end consumer has a level of comfort, not just with their standard delivery experience, but also at the same time during, what we're going through as a nation today.
Well, Jim, really appreciate you joining us today. That's some great information, and kind of a overview of what's happening with Final Mile. You've been listening to Jim Mikrut of FragilePAK, and this is News Desk. Thanks for joining us.